Hello, class. The next topic that we'll be speaking about is food, soil, and agroecology. And by agroecology, we simply mean agricultural ecology. We're going to start by talking about a very real problem that uh, we are right on the heels of. It's been projected that by the year of 2050, there will be 9 billion people on this planet. 9 billion people is something that our ancestors who hunted and gathered food never imagined. 9 billion people will need access to healthy and nutritious food. That concept, that need for that food, is what we call food security. Food security is when all or most people have ready access to healthy and nutritious foods that will sustain them in a healthy lifestyle. On the opposite end of that, we have food insecurity. This is living with chronic hunger and or poor nutrition. This is a very funny connection that exists on the planet right now, as in a lot of developing countries. People of a lower socioeconomic status are malnutrition, undernutritioned, and hungry. Their diets are low protein and high carb as they depend on mostly grains. A lot of key amino acids that they need in their diet is missing. A lot of these places suffer from vitamin A deficiency, which can lead to blindness, iron deficiency, which can lead to anemia, and iodine deficiency, which can lead to goiter and eventually deafness. In the US and other developed countries, there is a much different dynamic, as lower middle class and middle class suffer from chronic obesity, overnutrition, malnutrition, from eating things that weren't originally designed to go in the bodies, human bodies. The diets are high protein, high carb, and high synthetic sugar. And the diseases that are faced in these localities are heart disease, stroke, diabetes, cancer, and other obesity-related diseases. So it's pretty obvious that there is a problem now. So then how should a food system, an international global food system, from the local to global level be developed? At the base of this is environmental science and natural resource conservation. There are three dominant landscapes related to food systems. That is cropland, which raises mostly grains, inclusive of corn, wheat, and rice. Pastures and feedlots for your meat and meat products. And then fisheries and aquaculture for your fish and shellfish. All of these systems are based on a select few species. What does that mean? That means to establish all of these, for the most part, biodiversity has been vastly reduced. In order to bring these systems under the type of control uh, that these developed countries have wanted, they've used revolutions in machinery, water use, and agrochemicals to do that. We'll talk shortly about the discrepancy between both high input and low input, industrial and small farms. But for now, let us take a tally on some of the things that industrial or high input ag has done. Uh, they've raised the startup costs. That makes it a very difficult market for people to get into. There's immense use of fossil fuels to operate that very machinery that we talked about, to prepare the grounds, to harvest the vegetables and grains, also for post-harvest as well. There's been uh, overuse of water resources. For instance, using water in ways that is not conserving of those resources. The use of agrochemicals such as inorganic fertilizers and pesticides, which have shortened uh, chemical cycles as well as reduced biodiversity. And then also monocropping. Monocropping is when you take a large area of land and you plant only one crop. And this is done extensively throughout the planet for such things as bananas, soybeans, cane, coffee, palm, and the list goes on. So in doing this, high input agriculture has created a place for itself that looked very different than 200, 300 years ago, in which diversity, including biodiversity, was encouraged. 90% of the farms in the U.S. are small farms, meaning that they gross less than $350,000 a year. 60% of farms make less than $10,000. Even though this is the case, small farms account for 52% of the land held in farms. Wow. So almost half of the land is controlled by 10% of the farms. Not only that, but less than 1% of the total sales are held by these large-scale farms, with a third of a percent earning greater than $1 million per year. On top of that, land acreage, production, and sales by large farms have doubled, more than doubled, since 1982. When we talk about sustainability, remember, we aren't only talking about sustainable ecosystems. We're talking about sustainable economic systems and sustainable cultural systems. So just as ecosystem sustainability is based in biodiversity, chemical cycling, and solar energy, We have economic systems whose sustainability is based in profit, reinvestment, job creation, and security. And cultural systems and social systems that are based, sustainability is based in equity and justice, quality of life, inheritance and security. With that understanding of sustainability, there is a problem that exists now. And with the expected 9 billion person population in 2050, these problems could only get worse if not addressed in both ecosystems, economic systems, and social systems. Now, when we talk specifically about some of the ecological issues of high input agriculture, uh, I want you all to pay attention to 6 specific areas. That's going to be biodiversity loss, soils, water, air, and human health. So, regarding biodiversity loss, this could be attributed to the degradation of forests, wetlands, and grasslands, which are not good for agricultural production. So, by human influence, they went in and actually deforested and turned these lands into agricultural lands. Right? When you cut down forests, when you raise wetlands and put animals on grasslands and allow them to dominate those landscapes that they are not native to, you reduce biodiversity loss. Also, eutrophication and pesticide runoff. When we have the runoff of these agrochemicals into surface waters, either directly or indirectly, we are decreasing our biodiversity. What you should do is take a look at eutrophication and its impact on the Gulf of Mexico, or go to any gulf or major river in the world, the Amazon, the Nile, the Danube, and then look at what eutrophication has done in those areas. Also, the killing of wildlife that hasn't been protected, and then the loss of genetic diversity from wild plant types. Right? If we go into monoculture, we are increasing risk in those systems as far as limiting the biodiversity. You increase the risk of loss. Now, in terms of soils, soils are the life of agriculture. They're not only life of agriculture, life of the ecosystems, with their horizons, their ability to recycle nutrients, serve as a carbon sink. But with high input agriculture, soil conservation is not primary. So that leads to erosion, loss of soil fertility, salination, waterlogging, right? And in other parts of the world, even desertification. And if we dig even deeper, we see that the lack of conservation of water is problematic. Just as we talked about eutrophication and agrochemical runoff, there's also been water waste, right? It's pesticide and fertilizer pollution, as well as microbial and antimicrobial pollution, right? So some of the outbreaks, as well as uh, the strengthening of pathogens because of antibiotics in cattle and chicken, right? So this has been a gross mismanagement of chemicals uh, at the global scale, okay? And a lot of this runs into our water systems and pollutes the hydrologic cycle. How does the air suffer? Emissions from carbon dioxide from fossil fuel use, emissions from inorganic fertilizers in the form of nitrous oxides, methane from cattle, right, from both ends of the cattle, and then other air pollutants work their way in through burning fossil fuels and pesticide sprays. In regards to human health, once again, the microbes and antimicrobes are an important issue because of them working their way into both our meat and our water systems that we use for recreational as well as nutritional use. Pesticide residues as well, which have been shown, many have been shown to be cancer causing, mutagenic, and also the pollution of groundwater uh, from nitrates can lead to methemoglobinemia or blue baby syndrome. Now, the last area of concern, which uh, can be argued and is argued by many, uh, is the impact of genetically modified organisms or GMOs. Now, the positives, the things that people will say to you is that it allows the small guys into the market because it saves on them on costs. So they can use less fertilizer, they can use less water, they can use less pesticides. The crops can grow faster, and the energy needs are reduced. So in that way, they have tried to sell themselves as being environmentally sustainable. But truly, there are unpredictable genetic and ecological risks and effects. These are new organisms, right, with unpredictable mutation patterns, unpredictable competition amongst and with other organisms. They can lead to harmful toxins and new allergies in foods. It's been documented that some of these very GMOs, which have been designed to increase yield, produce no increase in yield at all. Building and designing pesticides into crops has also yielded more pesticide-resistant pests. Also, look at some of the seed markets in the U.S. as well as abroad that have been disrupted because of this idea of ownership of the genome that is in the seeds. And finally, there's a reduction in genetic diversity, right? If a company has a magic seed with a genome that they have developed, they're going to sell that to as many farmers as possible. The same genome existing across the planet. No local varieties, but a seed designed by Professor X or Professor Y. Okay, so as we're shooting for this 9 billion people in 2050, we've noticed that there's actual limits to our growth. Grain yields have slowed, irrigation is expensive. We've also depleted many of our groundwater sources. Right? Look into some of the issues in South Georgia, Mississippi, California, and Texas, as well as Florida. Right? Groundwater is not a renewable resource. That's in addition to some of the water wars that are going on for surface water. Right? As cities grow and cities seek to divert more water from rural areas where food is actually grown, who owns the water? And then one common saying is no one's going to make any more land. And that's true. So where to next? What is the next? What's on the horizon for agriculture? So I know this has been a very uplifting talk, but let's try to end on a somewhat good note. What does the future then look like of agriculture? Right? Do the big guys win? Well, many will argue no, right? Many will argue that some of these recent movements, though idealistic to some degree, have the very components that could give rise to a new food system. Right? So, in terms of the local food movement, right? They are attempting, or from my perspective, attempting to take the power out of the large scale farms and put it back into the, the, the hands of the small farmer. Right? So then you are going back and you're redressing some of these issues that we talked about in terms of reinvestment and profit, equity and justice. Right? And then as well as the organic or sustainable foods movement. And by organic, I don't mean no chemicals and growing by uh, this perfect equation that is nature friendly. And I mean just sticking to the foundation of organic farming, which is building soils, putting carbon back into the soils, treating soils with care, right? Now, some of these methods, you then look at some of these methods of mulching and organic fertilizer and biocontrol of pests. They then increase your biodiversity. They increase your species diversity. If you polyculture, introduce more than one crop to a field, you're increasing spatial diversity, you're increasing vertical diversity, right? You're putting mulch and compost into the soil, introducing beneficial microorganisms that allows for functional diversity, as well as species diversity, right? So, and finally, the chemical cycling. When you use the organic fertilizer, you're then slowing the process down as it was meant to be. You're allowing the organisms in the soil, the worms, the uh, the mesoorganisms, the microorganisms to do their jobs, increasing the functional capability of the soils. And then you also see, back to the social aspect, you see farmers coming together and co-ops and food hubs to market, right? Once again, this redresses those issues of both social and economic inequities. So this entire movement or this entire approach is what we're calling agroecology. And with that, I leave you and look forward to the next lecture.